All right. Let me start off simply say who I am. I'm Ivo Havinga. I'm a former Director Economic Statistics from UNSD and now advisor to the UN, and particularly Stefan. I will be your moderator, so I was asked to do the first sort of words to speak and welcome you to this meeting. It is the second webinar on artificial intelligence and data science for economic statistics. And the extension economic statistics to artificial intelligence and data science shows who has been the organizers of this meeting. It's been both the Committee of Experts on Big Data and Data Science and the Network of Economic Statistics, bringing together a large contingent of economic statisticians and data scientists. And we are very glad about it. One of the biggest hauls we ever did on an invitation. I must say, at least in the experience, it runs over 700 people that actually registered. I don't know who will actually join, but it shows the interest both from the data scientists as well as from the economic statisticians to find common ground. Now, this sprint, I just want to recall, consists of two sprints. One we did in November last month on the 7th, and this today. Which will be followed by an in-person, what we have now labeled as an international symposium on artificial intelligence and data science, basically with the extension on the evolving landscape. That will happen and will be hosted by the Federal Competitive and Statistics Center in Dubai, in Abu Dhabi. We just wanted to indicate that what we bring today is actually a major sort of development that we have seen around the statistical community in this particular area, which has been a groundswell in undertaking experimentation and testing and applications, and we want to grow that. So it's and also we want to share that where we are in developing that inventory as we go forward, and also learn from that. And we will talk about that. It will provide insights today and in the other forthcoming meetings of the successful use cases and dialogues on the strategy of integrating new artificial intelligence and data science technology. It will not only help in shaping the future of economic statistics and its production, it will be also an important step towards developing what is being increasingly called by different sort of developers on AI, the playbook. And this is a playbook on data science for official statistics. And that playbook will be very important to empower the statistical office with the new tools and methodologies for statistical production. I'd like to stop by just indicating the four objectives. The present, we will present a series of impactful artificial intelligence and data science projects in statistical productions, what we have called reproducible analytical pipelines. That is the first objective. And that with the data science projects on the compilation of economic statistics, as well as the use of generative artificial intelligence for the dissemination and interpretation, will provide you what we call a waterfront landscape of what is ongoing at the moment in official statistics. And again, we want to build on that. We want to talk about how we strategize ourselves. We want to talk about other elements of cross-cutting issues like new ethics maybe we want to develop, new strategic directions that may need to be developed for artificial intelligence in the use in official statistics. These are the objectives. I stop here. It is now my privilege to introduce Stefan Schweinfurt, my friend and director of Statistics Division. Stefan, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Ivo, and good morning from a very cold morning in winter morning in New York. But I wouldn't want to miss this event, so I did put on my new favorite sweater. And to welcome you all as the director of the UN Statistics Division to the second webinar. I think the first word in the organization I work for is the most important one, united. I mean, because what we do, we always bring people together, different countries, of course, primarily, but also different sectors, different types of expertise. And I think this event is such an example, and this is why I'm so happy about it and grateful to those who put the event together. So we have two big streams coming here together. Our network for economic statisticians has been very, very active for the last 3 years now, and has organized these new modalities of sprints, a series of intensive webinars that really give us the opportunity to connect interested and relevant people from all over the world. We've done this on Beyond GDP and housing and data strategy. And we are working together here. And the second stream is the UN Committee of Experts on Big Data and Data Science for Official Statistics, a long title, but every word is important. We used to refer to it also always only as Big Data originally. We started all the way back to 2014, 10-year anniversary. But we added purposefully the reference to data science, and there's also the notion that this is for official statistics. The orientation of this work is very clear. This committee of experts has been also very, very active, 8 task teams, and we have created a total of 6 global and regional hubs and many collaborative projects on the United Nations Global Platform. So I welcome these both streams coming here together and reflecting on the question, what can artificial intelligence, this big word that we discuss everywhere and that everybody still has difficulties grappling with, and where does it start and where does it end exactly? What can it do concretely for official statistics and in particular economic statistics? So I think this is a very worthwhile reflection. And what I really like in the agenda are really 2 things. We have very competent speakers, and I look around my screen here and I see the names of colleagues and friends from different parts of the world that are active both in the Big Data and Data Science Committee and in the Network of Economic Statistics. And I thank you for your contribution. And the second thing I like very much is that the agenda promises to give us very concrete examples how artificial intelligence was applied, and that is always something I'm very interested in. What does that mean specifically and concretely? So I thank you very much. I think there are many people who helped. Ivo Ronald leading it on my side, my team who is making this happening, from the data science group and the network of economic statistics, and from your side, the many speakers. Of course, we have, I would also like to thank the United Arab Emirates and Mohammed, who has offered us to host an event on this specific topic so that we have a grand finale on these reflections very soon in January. Hope many people can join. And we ultimately bring these results, of course, to the Statistical Commission, which is our big body, and that will meet in the first week of March. Both mechanisms that I mentioned earlier operate, of course, under the Statistical Commission. But I'm sure you want to know the substance, and without further ado, we can, I pass it over to somebody who's really an expert, our dear colleague and friend Osama Rahman, who is the chair of the leadership group under the Big Data and Data Science Committee. So Osama, the floor, thanks for being part of this and for leading it. And the floor is yours. Thank you all for connecting.
Thank you, Stefan. I'm not going to say much for multiple reasons. I have tech issues right now, and I have health issues as well. And both Ivo and Stefan have already said the most important things that need to be said. So this is the second sprint webinar that we are doing. The first one, to an extent, focused on how statistical offices need to come together with multidisciplinary teams and working across the organization in terms of delivering and implementing data science and Gen AI into the work of national statistical offices. It was done via some use cases. Today, what we're going to do is have a stronger focus just on the use cases. Some fantastic use cases that people have. So that's kind of the two parts to the sprint, excuse me, to the two sprint workshops. And as you've heard, we're very grateful to Mohammed and the UAE Federal Competitiveness and Statistics Center for hosting a workshop in January. And I can say right now, I so want to be in that weather rather than the weather we're having currently. It sounds like Stefan's feeling the same. Where we will, excuse me, sorry, continue to use some of the use cases we are going to have seen at the first sprint workshop and that we are seeing today to really help develop further and make a big movement on the data science and AI playbook that is being developed under the auspices of the UN Data Science Leaders Network, which we hope will be an incredibly valuable tool for NSOs around the world as they look to integrate data science methods and Gen AI approaches more and more into the work of national statistical offices. I thought I'd say a couple of words about Gen AI, because that's the big topic of the moment, right? And of course, everyone goes, oh, disruptive technology. I'm not into, I don't really believe in disruptive technology. Technology has always progressed, always, right? You know, sort of moving from doing statistics by clipboard and on paper to mainframe computers, to laptop computers, to working in the cloud, moving maybe from SAS and SPSS to R and Python. So I think change is continuous. You know, as technology emerges, we always evolve. But I think, excuse me, what we are seeing is more rapid technological change happening nowadays. And I think for me, what this means for NSOs is that we will need to more rapidly evolve in the work we do and how we operate. Okay, those who know me will have heard me use the term more rapid evolution. I'm not into transformation or big change programs. I think what all organizations do is they evolve, and we will need more rapid evolution. And again, on AI, it's interesting. Some people's, and we have to implement, you know, using AI approaches in a safe way. Excuse me. Actually, you know what? I'm going to stop. This is not going well. Back to Ronald.
I'm sorry, Osama, but I was increasingly interested. So one day you have to finish this off. But we got it very well in the sense of what you were saying. You know, the talk is now about generative AI, and is this really a significant step change, or is it simply an aspect of you know, the evolution of technology and that what we apply? But your point is also well taken, that we seem to be going on an accelerated path. So the evolution, you know, at snail pace in the past, when we started way back 3,000 years ago, the speed has picked up, and it is important that we come together and see how we can actually harness all our power, probably in combination with the for good private sector, to move forward in this area that is so much on the front of everybody's mind and front page news, at least here where I live in New York, and but also in the Financial Times, for instance. With that, thank you, Osama, and thank you, Stefan, for the introduction and the welcoming words. We'll now move to the actual substance of the meeting. Just briefly, Mohammed, before I make your introduction, we will have now we move to session 2, sorry, of the agenda, which is an overview, and Mohammed will say much more about that. He will moderate that meeting. Then we will fall out in breakouts. Ronald will introduce that portion when we start to break out and how we're going to break out. And then he will explain more about how the sessions will be organized. And then we will conclude with a final panel, which we hope that Osama can still make. Osama, take some water, take a little break, do a nap. You have an hour and a half to be back and finish your thoughts that you started. And then we will conclude. We will stop at 10, and we will keep each other on agenda. With that, I am going to introduce Mohammed, who will be moderating the next session. Mohammed, always a pleasure, my friend. Those who don't know him, he is an executive director of statistics and data science sector at the Federal Competitive and Statistics Center, United Emirates, which is the federal statistical office of the United Arab Emirates. And he's been there since 2012, leading the national statistical production. And also he is overseeing work of the local statistical office in the various Emirates of the United Arab Emirates. He's also the data chief of the office, and therefore has a strong insight in the overall sort of strategy of the organization moving forward, including about the use of artificial intelligence and data science. If you know Mohammed, he can talk extensively on the use of AI in the United Arab Emirates, particularly also the use that they develop in their own office. So Mohammed is well placed also to host the meeting, and we thank him again for hosting it to show us where that could lead us. I'd like to conclude, Mohammed, in saying something of your international involvement. He is a member of the United Nations Network of Economic Statisticians. He is also the co-chair of the new expert group on well-being measurement, which Stefan is really working with at the moment, because that's something that comes to his table with the new resolution by the General Assembly on creating a new framework. Let's do it in short, Stefan, called Beyond GDP, with a high-level group that Stefan is putting together with the Secretary General. And he is also, of course, a member, wherefore he is in this meeting. Well, he's in this meeting due to both the United Nations Committee of Experts on Big Data and Data Science. So, Mohammed, you're well placed to moderate the next meeting. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ivo. Thank you for the introductions. I like what Osama said about the rapid evolutions, because we had the discussions about how can we really do the revolution of merging the data framework or the national data framework with the statistical framework in the country, and how the AI would really try to help both in these current merge of both frameworks, which is really interesting. And that takes me to the current sessions, and we have two amazing speakers who will talk about the use of artificial intelligence and large language models in official statistics. The first sessions will be with Enkyong Choi, the head of Statistical Management and Modernization Unit from the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe. Choi leads the Statistical Management and Modernization Units divisions, and also as UNSCE Secretariat for High-Level Group for Modernization of Official Statistics. She also has extensive international collaboration experience on emerging technology and modernization topics such as AI, standard, and communications. We will see in her presentation an in-depth exploration of how generative AI, including machine learnings and deep learning techniques, is transforming the field of official statistics by expanding the data capabilities, improving citizen engagements, and modernizing the internal operation within statistics by addressing the risk, the governance, the challenge, and the evolution of the role of national statistic organization in AI-driven era. We will see an interesting, I would say, concept of what, why, where, and how the generative AI will have impact on national statistics. So I'll leave the floor to Enkyong to present her contents right now.
Thank you, Mohammed, for introduction. So let me share my screen first. You confirm if you can see this presentation slide, okay?
Yes, it's clear.
Okay. Yeah. So let me start with that. Yeah. So thank you for the presentation. Thank you for the introduction. So I'm giving a presentation around. This is a more going to be introductory nature to set the scene for the rest of the sprint today. So maybe for the concrete substantive use cases, maybe you need to hold the breath a little bit more. And I'm gonna go over 4 questions at the very high level. What generative AI is, and what should it matter for official statistics, and where it can be used in statistical organization, again, at the more high level, and how based on these use cases, what are the risks they are, and how people want to tackle these risks and then mitigate them. And I also want to conclude this presentation with some open questions that are more for the how the official statistics community should tackle this emerging technology in general. So I think the audience of this sprint can be really broad here. So maybe some people are already using generative AI as a daily job. But maybe there are some people who are not yet so familiar with this technology. So I thought that we should start with a question of what generative AI is, and especially how it is different from more well-known machine learning. So if we start with the AI in general, it is probably most broad term and referring to a system and machines that are capable of performing tasks that are typically requiring a human intelligence, which can include a more complex rule-based system. And machine learning is a subset of AI where machines use data to learn how to do certain tasks without being explicitly programmed. So this one is heavily based on data. Then we have deep learning, which is a type of a machine learning algorithm, and then the generative AI, a more recent version of AI system, which really got huge attention and interest the last 3 years with the release of ChatGPT. So for example, for machine learning, if we give a bunch of images of dogs and cats to computer and tell them to check, say, their ears and noses or sizes of the animal. And for sake of simplicity, let's say computer knows how to find the ears and nose are. Then computers find a rule based on the images. So for example, the more pointy ears are, or the more or the smaller the size are, it's more likely to be cat. So you can see that we first give computers some data and then the feature to guide them to learn from data. Because ear, nose, or size are something that we implicitly know as an important feature that differentiate the cats from the dog. So there is some degree of human knowledge playing a role here. And once learned, these machines can make a prediction on which image is cat or dog at a much faster and in a much larger quantity. But in many cases, things are much more complicated. So for example, how do we differentiate the painting from Rembrandt or Vermeer? And the deep learning type of machine learning algorithm is also known to be very good with this type of a task. So computers can now find the features that are useful to differentiate these 2 images without being explicitly shown what feature to look for. And you can imagine this type of a system is extremely useful when there is no prior knowledge or it's just difficult to formulate the features in human languages. Now, with the generative AI, we can ask the computers to generate images of dogs with a certain style, like give me a photo of a cat with a pearl earring in a Vermeer style or something like that. And this type of a capacity to generate something new based on a cue is really something that we didn't have before in human history. So what does it mean for statistical organizations? And in official statistics, maybe at least the last century, inference and estimation has been a major tool that allow NSO to be able to say something about population based on just a sample of this population. And maybe during the last 5-10 years, machine learning or deep learning has allowed the statistical organization to help automating predictive tasks that were once thought to human work, were very resource intensive. And it also helped producing new statistics based on its power to figure out patterns from very complex data, such as satellite imagery or aerial imagery data. Now, why generation should matter for statistical organization? And that is the second question that I want to address in this presentation. And this, yes, sorry for this mishap with the animation, but I will show you the full figure soon. So this capability that generative AI offers is really different from what we had before. And I use example of a generation of cats and dogs painting, but it can generate much more than this. Yeah, text to a level that can converse with the humans, and then generate summaries based on long text or images, videos, and so on. And I think Osama mentioned about how technology help a human to do things much better over the history. And just like many technology development that boosted the human productivity over the course of a human history, like internet, or maybe Gutenberg, or some painting press machines, and so on. Generative AI could bring in efficiency gain, but again, in a little bit different way than the machine learning that we used before to the work of statistical organization. And this capability is seen extremely helpful as a statistical organization strive to evolve in this changing environment by increasing productivity across the organizations and improve service delivery. So where generative AI can be used in statistical organization. So machine learning has been particularly good with the automating repetitive tasks in the production process, such as classification, validation, edit, and the imputation. And when it comes to generative AI, the area of application is much more broader. And if we take into account how generative AI-based services such as ChatGPT can help with our routine tasks, from writing email, reports, and doing translation and so on, the area where generative AI can assist is almost all activities happening within the statistical organization. So it's almost like asking where internet can be useful in statistical organization. But even if we focus more on the work more directly related to statistical organizations' core business, the scope of application is really beyond this processing part of a business process. And during this year summer, we did a survey under the Conference of European Statisticians, CES, to gather information on the use of generative AI in statistical organizations and the challenges associated with it. In total, there are 41 national and international statistical organizations responded to it. And we had a question asking what would be the level of impact generative AI has already or is expected to have on their working areas. And we see that the impact or expectation of impact is really broadly distributed across the different working areas in statistical organization, with the coding and the IT development ranked as a top, with actually quite a large margin. As you might know, large language models, it's a type of generative AI specialized with the language. It's not only good with the natural human language, but also with the programming languages. And I think already many developers or coders across the different industries are using, taking advantage of this capability through, for example, Copilot or ChatGPT, and doing their coding work. And also in many areas in statistical production, require some level of coding and some development of software. And I think this particular capability is very useful because many NSOs are trying to convert their production pipeline written in proprietary software to open source programming languages such as R or Python. And also there is a general transition to open source software, which require, again, some coding and IT skill. So I think a generative AI is likely to have a great impact directly or indirectly in this respect. Now, going into a more specific production activity, I think classification is continue to be an area that generative AI can help a lot by automating. And this is area where free text, for example, from the open-ended survey questionnaire or administrative records or web scraped data are classified into certain codes in the statistical classification system. And this is something that probably every NSO is doing and very resource intensive and can be also quite tedious and repetitive, but still very critical because only after this task, data that the NSO collected can be systematically aggregated and compared in the downstream task. And machine learning has been very useful for this, and many NSOs, I think, already have worked on it. But generative AI can offer additional flexibility and maybe also allow avoiding training a model with the sensitive data and so on. But again, generative AI can be helpful in an area that more traditional machine learning couldn't, such as the generation of communication material. And currently there's a lot of competition for attention in public or media domain in general these days. And the targeted communication tailored to audience, product, or situation, the importance of this is greater than ever. And generative AI can help communication experts to produce targeted communication material much more efficiently. And also it, in a way, democratize the creation of a multimedia material. So people or offices without expensive editing tools or specialized expertise could create videos and image much more easily. And generative AI can be used to develop a tool that can support the staff doing their research, write a draft report for the release based on certain data set, and generation of a synthetic data or development of a chatbot, which I find a very fascinating use case. And of course, these are not just from my imagination. And we have a repository of use cases collected over the last few years. And you will see a very interesting concrete example from some of this area in section 3 and 4. So how should it be used? I think actually the how question can be two level. One is how do we actually use it? Do we just use existing service? Do we develop a solution tailored for our use? Or if we develop, do we do it in-house? Or which model to use, which software to use, where to host it? So there are a lot of how to implement question. But in this presentation, I will focus more on how should it be used in the statistical organization. So there are inherent issues about generative AI, like hallucination, ethics, and I think many people heard about these issues. And these inherent AI issues are actually more pronounced for National Statistics Organization. First, there is a higher risk for error than in private sector for NSOs. And there are also challenges as organizations to manage the change and then manage risks at the corporate level. And there's also challenges of ensuring quality standard. And actually, question of what do we even mean by quality when using the generative AI for certain use cases. In the survey mentioned earlier, we also asked what concerns statistical organizations have when using generative AI. So the majority of organizations are indicating they indicated they are very concerned about confidentiality and security and accuracy of generative AI outputs. And with almost 2/3 of respondents saying that they are very concerned about this. And one thing I want to mention here is that of course, in general, people have this kind of concerns, but the risk profile is quite different depending on the use cases. So the level of risk is higher for this use case, for this particular risk, but not so much, and so on. So like for public-facing chatbot, for the information search, I think this area has really they need to have a really good accuracy, but maybe copyright issue is less concern. And for generation of communication materials such as image, maybe copyright concern can be quite serious, but the accuracy could be less of a risk because there is usually human communication experts directly interacting with AI before releasing them to the public. So I think it will be quite a strategic choice for each organization, checking what are the potential use cases for official statistics, and assessing which risk they were willing to take on, and then building on the early experiments and experiences with these more low-hanging use cases, and then expanding the use case based on that. So in the survey, we also ask how they are trying to safeguard against these risks. Many organizations mentioned the development of internal policy, governance guidelines, along with ensuring that human oversight and accountability are there. At least at the time of this survey, 2/3 of organizations said that they don't have a policy yet about generative AI. So I think this is definitely a priority for many. But there are also some technical way people mention, such as the self-hosting, using open source models, using retrieval augmented generation techniques, so that the generation is based on some desired knowledge base, not from scratch. And then we can also introduce the functions in the user interface by design, so that AI model give not only just answer, but some rationale as to why such answer is given. And I think that there are still a lot to explore when it comes to generative AI, how to govern, how to manage the risk. And we are hoping to share this collective knowledge on this aspect through the HLG MOS project that we are currently running on generative AI. And I think Vitas and Olivier will share more on this in the session 3 presentation. And I want to conclude this presentation with a question, because to be honest, there are many more questions than answers on this new technology. And I think many innovative technology that official statistics community have gone through have shared some common issues, like you have to manage change, you have to develop the capability because it's a new technology. But there are issues unique to particular technology. Like I think for big data, the data accessibility was a big issue. For cloud, data sovereignty was a big issue. For open source adoption, the license and legal issue was a big concern. I think for generative AI, there are issues such as keeping up with and adapt to rapid pace of change, but also significantly how generative AI affects the information landscape, with these AI-based services becoming more and more prominent source of information and knowledge. And we can develop a chatbot for our database, but that does not stop people going to the chatbot. And of course, this already happened. And I think it would be naive to say that this is the first time that people are not going to NSO's website. People are already using search engines such as Google or even social media to obtain their information and knowledge. And I think generative AI is definitely bringing new complexities in this challenging situation. And when the ChatGPT came out, I think many people play around, and I did it myself. And this is the result that I got from, I think, 2023 or late 2022. So I asked inflation rate for South Korea in 2018, and it was telling me that it was a 1.5 in one case and 1.9 other case, which is really not good. But it was also saying that the data is based on the data from central bank. when the source of data should be actually from National Statistics Office, not Central Bank. When I tried only this week for this presentation, the same question, at least it was giving me a consistent answer of 1.5, although it gives a correct source later, but it gives a World Bank in IMF as a source of data. And I think many of you have noticed that ChatGPT now also provides a search tool within the app. But when I asked to confirm this data based on the database or recent sources, it's drawing data from none of the sources it mentioned above, but from some kind of a data compilation site, so inflation.com or something like that. Is this wrong, or is it okay as long as this website could draw official statistics correctly, or should ChatGPT or the model itself, the model behind these services should have known NSOs website, or should they draw data from there? And I think that this question of what is the right approach or how to adapt to this very fast changing tools, and whether we should, as a community of official statistics, work with this AI provider, and if so, how to work with them. I think this will remain as a big questions for our community as we move forward. So that will be the end of my presentation. And then there are some resources at the end of the presentation that I mentioned earlier. So you can visit this individually once the presentation slides become available.
Thank you, Kyung. I think it's interesting and where and how to use it and how careful we should be. Really, the last part of identifying different sources, that was very interesting. I guess need a lot of research, especially when making certain decisions or getting information for countries. Well, the second presentation will be about roadmap to adoption of artificial intelligence by Wesley Young from Statistics Canada. Wesley will unveil the comprehensive adoption of AI and the roadmap, and what are the opportunities awaiting at our doorstep of National Statistics Office. The content will have a bit details on the visions of for responsibly integrated artificial intelligence technologies, including generative AIs and large language modelings to modernize the operations and enhance service delivery, and most importantly also building expertise in data science and application for artificial intelligence method. Wesley, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mohammed. You did a very good summary of my presentation, so maybe I should get you to do it. I'm just going to try to make sure I can share it.
Okay, go ahead, Wesley.
Well, as Mohammed said, what I'm going to hopefully present is sort of our AI adoption roadmap at Statistics Canada. Next slide, please. So at first, when we started thinking about this roadmap, we had opportunity to doorstep without the question mark. So more recently, though, with a lot of work that's been going on, a lot of investigation, it was myself that added sort of the question mark. And I think this relates a lot to what sort of Osama was talking about. You know, is this a revolution or an evolution? I think it's more an evolution. And as I said, over the last, I don't know, 6 months, 8 months, we've done a lot of investigation, and I think Milana will talk a little bit about it. Christos will also talk a little bit about it. It's not that we're not saying there's not an opportunity, but I personally think that the opportunity is not what we thought it was maybe 6 or 8 months ago. So I'll then talk about our roadmap to AI adoption. Okay, there's 5 pillars there, and I'll go through the pillars of the roadmap, and then I want to just close with a few lessons that we've learned so far. Next slide, please. So when we started discussing this roadmap to adoption, we were really concentrated on generative AI, in particular, large language models. At the time it came out with ChatGPT, it took the world by storm. What was it? It had the most number of over 1 million users in a matter of days or something like that. It was a you know, quite a step forward in terms of LLMs or generative AI. The generative AI, as Kyung mentioned, it generates human-like text. Okay, so we looked internally. We said, okay, do we need to jump on this, or how can we leverage this? So we thought one of the things going on, as we all know, with NSOs, there's more space, more competition in the statistics space right now. We felt that by investigating whether by leveraging these NSOs we can maintain our legacy relevance and in particular competitive advantage. Google's always coming out with new things, Facebook or Meta, I guess it's called now, Microsoft, Amazon, and so forth. What we were thinking is that, and there's a lot of this is covered in Income's presentation as well, how can we optimize operations, and in particular to allow our employees to dedicate time to more value-added tasks? There's a lot of tasks that our employees are doing that are very repetitive, that really don't use their talents. They don't use the knowledge that they gain through their university and training and experience and so forth. So we were hoping that we can use this generative AI technology or large language models to optimize those operations. This would allow us to better serve Canadians. If we have people actually using their talents to the utmost, it will be better off for Canadians. So we looked at how can we advance how we deliver our services to Canadians through systemic adoption of Gen AI methods and techniques. We were also worried that if we didn't act at this point in time, we were going to lose an opportunity. Okay, we were worried that we were going to be left behind, that other organizations will be leveraging this. They would be producing their own, I put official statistics in quotes, not official statistics produced by an NSO, but statistics out there in social media or on Google or on the blogs and so forth. And we were worried that if those people producing that information out there don't follow sort of the frameworks that we follow, the fundamental principle of official statistics and so forth, do we risk Canadians depending on low quality data or low quality information, and we risk having a reputational risk for StatCan? In particular, we also thought this was a good opportunity for us because more recently we had set up or defined our strategic plan objectives, which were to build the next generation statistical programs, building and enabling infrastructure, and shape a healthy, diverse, and skilled workforce. We felt all three of these points here, objectives, would be touched by LLMs. Next slide, please. Thank you. So just to step back a little bit and look more AI in general, StatCan have been using AI for a while. And Income talked about some of the use cases. We've been using it for NLP for coding. We've been using it for image processing. We've been using it for classification of comments. We'd also been experimenting at that time already with large language models. So she talked about chatbots. So census reference material is a particular chatbot that we were developing where users could look for information in a contained source, a limited source of material that was reference material for our census. We also looked at report generation. We were calling it table to text. Okay? If we gave it tables of data, could they generate text that could be used as a draft of a report or a document that we may consider putting on our website? And we also we're looking at using it for improving the interaction with our website, and Milana will talk more about that. We'd also built a significant expertise in data science, and in that data science group, they had some expertise in applying AI methods. We were also looking at technology. So as I said, we were already piloting use cases using LLMs, okay? But we were also building foundational infrastructure to enable AI adoption. One of the things I've been hearing more and more is, what's the pathway from proof of concept to production? And one of the things we felt was lacking there was sort of the IT infrastructure. And we felt that was one of the, I don't want to call it an obstacle, and I don't want to call it a barrier, but that was one of the things that was slowing down our path from proof of concept to production. So we were already investigating and investing on building a foundational infrastructure. We are also considering using new Gen AI technologies such as M365 Copilot. At the same time, we have been very, very involved with partnerships across the government of Canada, Advisory Council on AI, and also internationally. So we were involved in some groups in HLG MOS, and we've had many discussions with bilateral discussions with other and national statistical organizations. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we stepped back and we thought, okay, if we want to do this right, we need to come up with a roadmap. So we came up with this: how do we fully integrate AI with the vision to full responsible and secure integration of AI, including LLMs and StatCan, to deliver relevant programs, efficient operations, and enhanced services to Canada. That was our objective. Through discussions and a bit of brainstorming, we came up with sort of 5 pillars towards the roadmap. Okay, the first pillar was use cases to demonstrate business value. The second pillar was AI governance, which includes ethics, legal, technical, responsible AI. Christos will be talking about that a little bit later today. We had a pillar on AI and LMM tools. We had a pillar on AI playbooks, and we also had a pillar on supporting employees, which we felt was very important, as this was a new technology. Lots of questions, people wondering what they can do, what can't they do, how to do things, and so forth. Next slide, please. So under the use case pillar, we had already had, as I mentioned, quite a few use cases that we were either considering or we were already putting in place. And this is just a list of them. This is a little bit outdated. Some of them that we've finished, some of them we kind of put aside, and others we've added. But just give you an idea of, at that point in time, we had identified 13 use cases. We had some that were, somewhat feasible. Business value made it low. Some that are very high feasibility, very high business value. Okay, next slide, please. So under the use case pillar, really, as I said, what we wanted to do was have complete implementation of use cases. We didn't want to continue having proof of concepts and use cases and then have them kind of sit around as we had trouble putting them into production. We also wanted to make sure that we were pushing forward the right use cases. So we really wanted to see what were the business benefits. We, as I said, at that time, we had some use cases. We were also continuing to identify additional use cases that would be of high business value for Statistics Canada. What we wanted to do was set up an AI governance so that we push forward the use cases that we felt were the most feasible and had the most business value. We are also preparing for democratization of AI technology, in particular the Copilot. Entered into an agreement with Microsoft where I think we had 300 licenses that people could play with. We really wanted to get people to try things, see what it could do, get their impression, and so forth. I saw the other day that the Australian government did a similar thing, and they just put a report out, I think last week or whatever. So it's actually quite interesting. What was in the report is not that different than what we saw. So if you haven't seen that, I encourage you to take a look at that. Next slide, please. Under the governance pillar, so what we really wanted to make sure is that this didn't become sort of the Wild West. Okay, with all of the excitement about ChatGPT and so forth, we are worried that employees might do things that maybe they shouldn't, put protected information into ChatGPT to do this, that, or the other thing. So we set up a strategic governance with an AI adoption working group. What we really tried to do there, because this is overarching, this is going to touch essentially all employees that StatCan, we want a representation from all fields or all domains with StatCan. We are co-chairing it with the IT and the methodology and data science areas, as we felt that those were the 2 areas that would kind of have to push this forward and were probably the most knowledgeable about what LLMs or AI can do. So this working group would oversee business impact and set direction and vision. An important part of this was the legal and ethical dimensions. Okay, so as I said, Christos will talk a little bit about that, in particular the responsible AI, including the core guiding principles. The other thing that we wanted to make sure is that the technology aspect was done correctly. So our governance around the technology side is what we call our Enterprise Architecture Review Board. Next slide, please. So, as I said, there was AI tools pillar. There was a couple things we wanted to make sure. The most important in my mind was setting up an infrastructure so that we could go from proof of concept or ideation into implementation. So We actually put in an investment proposal, and we're now building that infrastructure. One of the things that we felt was hindering a lot of these projects moving forward was all of the infrastructure wasn't set up for us. There was a lot of work had to be done on cyber and so forth. So we're working closely, data science, as well as with the IT group, to set up an infrastructure where there's modules that are set up so that it's easier to go from proof of concept right into production. So we wanted to have a scalable, reproducible infrastructure to support innovative use cases and minimize time to production for new products. We felt by not doing that, we wouldn't be able to support the AI projects and other projects in particular to get into production. And this has been one of the major, I shouldn't say complaints, but one of the major comments that we hear about data science projects. You know, we do these really great use cases, and they look really, you know, like they can be very useful for an NSO, yet we don't hear a lot of them going into production. And part of that we felt was sort of we didn't have the right infrastructure. Next slide, please. The other thing that we wanted to look at was how could we leverage Microsoft Copilot? So as I mentioned, we entered into an agreement with Microsoft to get 300 licenses, and we spread them throughout the organization so that people were doing different things with them. What we were looking at was whether they can enhance employee performance through content generation. And Kun talked a lot about this, drafting emails, you know, how do we direct decisions, create presentations, minutes for meetings, and so forth. What we wanted to really do there was to probably just about every other NSO in the world, we're hearing a lot of employees feel they're overworked. They're doing a lot of repetitive tasks. There's a lot of pressure on them. It's impacting sort of, I won't say productivity, but it's definitely impacting the employees' mental health, wellness, innovation, work-life balance, and all that, and all of those things. So while this did have some business value, we also felt that we owed it to our employees to see if we can help optimize operations to allow them to have a better work-life balance, improve mental health, and allow them, as I said, to do what they were really trained to do. So by not doing that, we felt that we would lose, well, we worried about losing employee engagement. In fact, we've already seen that. We do, every 2 years, we do a public service employment survey. And we've seen over the last couple of years that people are feeling overworked. The work-life balance is not what it used to be. There's some impacts on mental health. Some of that may be pandemic related, so it's not just related to work. But we felt that we owed it to our employees to see if we could help them out. Next slide, please. The next pillar is the AI playbooks pillar. And what we wanted to do was to not to have duplication. Okay. We didn't want you know, three different areas in the organization looking at the same use case, or not sharing information that may help, you know, their neighbor, their colleague, and so forth. So we put out the first draft of guidelines on AI, this is Canada, kind of outline the do's and the don'ts of using Gen AI, for instance. Okay, don't put protected information into ChatGPT. Okay, that type of information. We also started working on a draft modular architecture for AI application, as I mentioned. As I also mentioned, we wanted to manage which AI use cases would go forward. So we've developed a business framework to assess which AI cases we should support, push forward, and so forth. One of the things that I think is very important is we're defining what AI for StatCan is. What I find is that when we talk about AI, we did the same thing with data science. I felt we did the same thing with modernization. We use these words, but we never actually define them. Okay, so I think when we talk about AI at StatCan, we include NLP, image processing, classification, coding to standard coding, and so forth like that. However, I think that when people talk about AI now, a lot of them automatically go to large language models and generative AI and so forth. So we felt it was important to actually define what is it that we mean by AI at StatCan, so we're all talking the same language. And we're now defining or drafting our AI strategy for the organization. We're not there yet. We're close to having a first draft, but that's what we're working on now. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, the last pillar was the employee support pillar. In fact, probably it should be the first pillar. It's really important that we wanted to get this out to employees. One of the worst things that can happen with employees is not being clear, is the unknown. Because then rumors start and they don't start doing this, that, or the other thing, and they don't get guidance, and it just kind of devolves into, you know, a disorganized mess. So on the employee pillar, we actually identified 4 large groups of users. Okay, we had our basic user, and in fact, I believe that the majority of our employees I would put as a basic user. These are the users that are going to use Gen AI and AI. They're not going to program with it. They're not going to develop new AI. They're not going to develop new LLMs and so forth. Then we had a slice that we called sophisticated users or prompt engineers. These are people that have a little more experience with it, can do a little bit more. They're more interested in using it for more than just writing emails and summarizing, you know, documents or meetings and so forth. Then we had our data scientists. These are the ones that are actually maybe developing or fine-tuning large language models and so forth. And then finally, our last group was infrastructure, which is mostly the IT group. We wanted to categorize employees into these 4 groups because we felt that the communication plans needed to be tailored to each group. We didn't want to send something that, you know, a data scientist would fully understand, but the basic user wouldn't have no idea what we're talking about. So it was important to us to categorize, and then we would tailor the communications to the level of knowledge or utilization. We are putting up communities of practice so that people can learn from each other. We felt this was really important. We have a very successful community of practice for our Python programmers. So we wanted to follow that model. Again, based on these categories, we wanted to group appropriate training. Okay? You wouldn't send a basic user to a course that you might want to send a data science to. And we also initiated some, because we are doing the M365 Copilot proof of concept or use case, we initiated training community practice for the M365 Copilot initiative. Next slide, please. So that's our roadmap. We're in different areas. We're at different places on the roadmap, on different areas for the pillars. Milana will be talking a little bit more about some of how we're doing IntelliStatCan or implementing an LLM on top of our StatCan website. Christos will be talking a little bit more on the responsible AI stuff. I thought I'd just end with some lessons learned, and I'll be perfectly clear here. These are lessons learned from my point of view. Okay, so these aren't necessarily the lessons learned that you might hear if you speak to our chief statistician or others of Statistics Canada. So AI has been very successful leverage for ingestion of unstructured data. In my mind, this is, I think, the biggest inroad that we've made. And Inquin mentioned a few of these: image processing, the processing of satellite images. How can we use satellite images in our production of official statistics? We're doing natural language processing for PDF documents. Okay, we're pulling out balance sheets and income statements from annual reports from publicly traded companies. Classification of comments. We're doing that for our census, some of our collection people. Is this a comment that needs to be responded to immediately? Or is this a comment saying, I had lots of fun filling out my questionnaire and we can respond to that later? We've had some successes with LLMs in optimizing operations, summarizing discussions. So we've been using it in Teams. I've been involved in a few meetings where we're recording it through Teams and Copilot, and it's coming up with a summary of the meeting. And the summaries are actually pretty good. Okay, people have used it for creating presentations, writing minutes, and so forth. Some of the investigations that we've done are very, very promising. Okay, we are looking at translation of confidential documents. We have documents that we cannot use commercially available translation LLMs because they're confidential before we publish. So our data science group is looking at training an in-house LLM to do this translation from English to French, French to English, and so forth. We're looking at LLMs to improve coding classifications. Most of the coding and classifications we use are more classification models, machine learning. Now we're finding that by involving LLMs, we're getting improved results. We're also looking at using it to improve optical character recognition for our senses. And from what I'm hearing, we're getting extremely good results on that. I will say that these are mostly internal operations, and I used to say human in the loop like a lot of other people. I'm now adding the word knowledgeable. There were some examples. There was a blog by a researcher, a statistical researcher, showed some really interesting what can happen with Gemini in terms of discussing a particular paper by an extremely well-known author. Only because she knew the paper could she point out what was coming out of Gemini was not correct. So I've been kind of introducing a knowledgeable human in the loop. My personal opinion is that we're not quite there for external uses. Okay, so Inkurin talked about public facing, and I think in her presentation, it's a little bit the same opinion. We had a meeting with Gartner last week, and one of the individuals said something really interesting, which I thought was kind of summed up my feelings. LLMs are being leveraged for their fluency. They write really well. Okay, the text that comes out, extremely well written. However, I don't think the content is there yet. And this is something that I think that, actually, I know Milano will talk a little bit about this. They're looking at ways around that, so maybe we will get there. But I really like the way he said that LLMs are being leveraged for their fluency. Anyway, so that's sort of our roadmap to adoption AI. I'll be ready to, or open for any questions at all. Thank you.
Thank you, Wesley. I think we are running behind the time. We took a couple of minutes from the next sessions. Just to summarize, I think the two presentations, there are a lot of learnings. Actually, myself, I have 4 questions, but I have to pass this time to move to the next sessions. I think in general, there are new learning of the use of generative AI on style adaptive visual content creations for statistics. That's a new things, which I think not a lot of statistic offices using that. Using the synthetic data sets to address some of the gaps which is mentioned in the existing data and actually reduce the surveys or the field surveys on producing the statistic or producing country statistics. With that, I'll go back to Ivo. Thank you very much, Wesley and Yin Yong. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mohammed. Thank you for moderating this, and we will learn from your questions later on because they're always very pointed. So share them later with us. Great presentations. I thought this was, for me, very insightful. I hope you felt the same thing. We are behind time, so I'm going to pass on to Ronald Janssen. He is the assistant director on this work on big data and data science. Been in there for probably a decade now, Ronald, setting up the program and moving this forward. So congratulations with your success so far. You will introduce the breakout session as we have 3 and 4, and the script, how we go about it, and tell us how you want us to catch up in the time that we have, because we're now about 40 minutes. No, that's too much. Maybe 30 minutes behind schedule, but we can pick up, I think. Maybe, but I hear your suggestions.
Thank you. Thank you, Ivo, and thank you, Mohammed, for the first session. Yes, I mean, really important how we start off the webinar, and I think Ingyung and Wesley did a tremendous job trying to set the stage for the webinar. So what we are going to do in session 3 and session 4 are looking at various use cases. Yes, we are behind time. So my recommendation to the moderator, so Ivo will fill in for Frankie Kay. We had Francesca Kay from the Central Statistical Office of Ireland scheduled to moderate session 3, but due to family circumstances, she's not able to join. So Ivo graciously will take her place. So my suggestion is that for the moderators that you get 10 minutes more. So instead of coming back at 9:20, you come back at 9:30, which is like an hour and 15 minutes from now. Within that, so you have 5 presentations on each side in session 3 and in session 4. So try to moderate. My suggestion to you in gaining a little bit of time is that we ask all of those who have questions to put them in the chat, and we'll pick up the questions either later or by interactive chat communications on the side. So that we'll do this in parallel to the presentations themselves. So Luis is leading session 4. Now, the way we do this is that we have a additional link for Teams on session 4, and the additional link has been put in the chat. So for those who want to listen to the presentations on session 4, they would have to switch to that one. Let me first tell you who is going to present in session 3 and in session 4. So session 3 has been titled Generative AI and Data Science Initiatives in Statistical Production. And we will have presentations from Victoria Huet from the Department of Commerce of the US on guidelines on AI-ready data. We'll have a presentation from Matt Weldon from the Data Science Campus of the Office for National Statistics of the UK on Classify AI. That's for classifying free text to statistical classifications, as Inkyung and Wesley already mentioned. Then we have about knowledge networks, the Caliper deployment. That's by Carola Fabi of the Food and Agriculture Organization. We also have in session 3 a presentation on the use of open source language models for automatic codifications of employment and economic activity. That's by Alejandro Pimentel from INEGI. I haven't seen Alejandro yet, so I hope he is here. And then we have a presentation by Vitas Vasiulis. He works for the CSO Ireland. He would do that together with Olivier Cirello from the Bank of International Settlements. They will present on generative AI and official statistics. So that's a project under the high-level group for modernization, so HLGMOS, where Inkyung already referred to. So they will present on that. So that's on session 3. And on session 4, the other session will be on the use of generative AI technologies for dissemination and interpretation of statistics. So on the dissemination side. And we will have presentations by Michael Stenger from the International Monetary Fund on talk to the manuals, sorry. We will talk about Gen AI chatbot for questions related to publications. That's Milana from Statistics Canada. We will have a presentation by INEGI Mexico on automatic generation of informative documents based on official statistics. That's Amado Esquer and Elio Villaseñor. And then we have the last 2 presentations are one from Yan Yung Tang from Statistics Singapore on the project Genie in Singapore. He will speak about that. And then finally, in session 4, we'll have Christos Sarakinos from Statistics Canada, who will speak about responsible AI. And Wesley mentioned and referred to that a few times. So that's the program. For those who want to go to the generative AI technologies for dissemination, please click on the link which is given in the chat. If you can't, for whatever reason, not see the chat, you can also go to our website, the website on the sprint and the webinar, where we also have that link for session 4. You can switch between the sessions if you click on the link here. to go to session 4, your current session will be put on hold, but you can easily switch back to the current session if you wanted to switch between presentations. So I leave it at that. Again, try to be back for the moderators, Ivo and Luis, by 9:30. You can do a little break in the middle somewhere for people to take a coffee or something, and but try to be back at 9:30. Thank you very much, and
Ronald,
I'll leave it to
sorry.
Ivo and Luis. Yeah, Clarence.
Ronald, do you mind if I interject really quick?
Yep.
If
sure.
you're having trouble with the CAPTCHA, I've realized that it's case sensitive. Try to use all caps if possible, and pay attention to if it's a capital letter or not. Yep, sorry about that.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Clarence. Thanks for that specification. Yeah, we've noticed, unfortunately, since about a little more than a month, the UN IT is putting in CAPTCHA. That's giving people trouble getting in. I hope that it doesn't discourage you to do the sessions, because there's a lot of nice presentations going on. So Ivo, take it from here on this side, and
Yeah.
Luis going to the other side in the other session. Please go ahead.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Ivo, it's all yours on this side.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think we move right into it, indicating that in this session, we will look at generative AI and data science initiative in statistical production. We have 5 excellent presentations. I went through them, well, except Victoria. I didn't go through yours yet, and you know why. But the others I have seen, they're really interesting. And Victoria, I saw your background. You bring something very new to me in the way, what is your background? I'll say a little bit about that. It's an interesting sort of combination that you have in your professional career. Let me indicate that I think if we want to have a break of about 10 minutes, right, which I think is a good thing. I've learned that productivity goes up if we move around a little bit. So
5 minutes. 5 minutes, Ivo.
He says 5 minutes, and I think that's the max that you get. But my suggestion is that we also limit, that I start cueing you that when the 10 minutes are up, so that you basically start to conclude, to allow everybody to have, let's say, a space of about 10 minutes to make the presentation. With that, Victoria Huet, the floor is yours. Let me introduce you. She is currently the Director of Artificial Intelligence Policy and Strategy in the Office of the Undersecretary for Economic Affairs at the U.S. Department of Commerce. And she is a Senior Advisor at PopFoc Foundation. She has an interesting background. She actually was an advisor to Nancy Pelosi, which I really loved her when she was in office. So that's an interesting one on these matters of technology. So she comes from the highest circles, and she come back to us in the Commerce Department. So with that, Victoria, the floor is yours. Looking forward to your presentation.
Amazing. Let me know if you can see this. Okay.
Yeah, well, go ahead.
Amazing. Perfect. Okay. So thank you for having me. As mentioned, I'm Victoria Howe, Director of AI Policy and Strategy in the Office of the Undersecretary for Economic Affairs, the U.S. Department of Commerce. So today I'll be talking about the guidelines for preparing open data for generative AI, which is an initiative I've been working on for the past year at the Department of Commerce. So today, within the AI policy space within the U.S., we're typically talking about 2 core questions, which is how can we promote responsible AI within society? So many of you might have seen the Biden administration put out the AI executive order. We have our AI Bill of Rights within the US. We have the AI risk management framework, et cetera, all kind of thinking about how do we promote AI, responsible AI throughout society. And then there's this other question of how do we leverage generative AI responsibly within government? So we deployed many chief AI officers across many of our federal agencies who work with our chief technology officers, our chief data officers, et cetera, to think through how do we deploy generative AI and other emerging AI technologies, to do interesting things to, make our lives more efficient, et cetera. But one conversation that hasn't really come up much that I've been focusing on and our team has been focusing on is how does government leverage AI to democratize access to data? And this is actually a really great continuation of the first presentation that we heard today, because we've been kind of thinking through, okay, there are data publishers, data providers are having the opportunity to get their data out to the public much easier because of these generative AI applications. And users from, no technical expertise to, users who use our data on a daily basis, and they navigate to our websites, and they, have deep data science backgrounds. There are all of these different types of people who want access to our data, and through these generative AI applications, no matter what their background is, they're able to have that access. But we, kind of started to see a lot of challenges that came with this, as again mentioned in the first presentation, where a lot of the data that we put out to the world we don't really have control over it after we actually disseminate it to the public. And we have no control over the way in which it gets consumed by many of these generative AI systems, and how it ends up being regurgitated to the public through, models like ChatGPT and Gemini, and et cetera. So when we kicked off this project in 2023, we had a lot of issues with the way that our data was being presented. Our statistical data, specifically, I'm going to talk about today, was being presented to the world through these models. So here we have an example from 2023 with ChatGPT and Bard. And you can kind of see a smattering of wrong information. A lot of it was from resources that were not the census department. It was typically, for this particular example, a lot of the data was actually coming from a random landscaping company in Suitland, Maryland, when prompted about, tell me about demographics of Suitland, Maryland, which is not what we want. We want a lot of the information that's coming to users to be coming directly to us, and not from random websites that have better SEO than we do. So we were thinking through this big challenge of how do we use generative AI to democratize access to data and address commerce's strategic goal, one of our strategic goals, to expand opportunity and discovery through data. And then number two, how do we ensure that commerce data through generative AI applications is accurate and prioritized over non-authoritative sources? And to give you a little bit of context for those who are unfamiliar with the U.S. Department of Commerce, we have 11 major bureaus that distribute massive amounts of data on a daily, yearly, weekly basis. And the biggest ones are the Bureau of Economic Analysis, the Census Bureau, and NOAA, which does much of the data on our weather data, and has like data on our atmosphere and oceans, and et cetera, and our U.S. Patent Office. So again, how do we think through disseminating our data in such a way that it can be consumed to be regurgitated accurately, and how do we end up being prioritized with many of these systems? And we have not fully solved this problem just yet, but we ended up kicking off a working group called the AI and Open Government Data Assets Working Group. And we wanted to think through this problem, or at least just get started thinking about this problem of how do we actually achieve generating AI-ready open data, or at least for this one, generative AI-ready open data. And so our goal was to distribute a report that should be coming out in the next couple of weeks, which we're really excited about. And we put that report together through interviews, and we opened up a request for information for the general public to comment on this. We had many conferences, and so it's been a long year of just convening with many experts in academia, industry, et cetera, to kind of get to where we are today. So when we kicked off these guidelines for generative AI ready open data, we kind of broke it down into 5 core categories of recommendations. So number 1 is documentation. We go into data and metadata formatting, data storage and dissemination, data licensing and usage, and data integrity and quality. I'm not going to read the slide, all the words on this slide, but ultimately, when we first kicked off this project, we were thinking through, okay, well, first, let's just think about how commerce data is actually integrating within generative AI systems. And really, any public data provider their data is being consumed in this particular way. So we broke it down into 4 categories, and this is definitely, we're oversimplifying this for the general public. This report will be consumed by state and local governments and policymakers, as well as technical staff within government entities. So we tried to kind of use language and lingo that is kind of in that middle ground of, technical ability. So the 4 kind of categories break down into training. So we understand that a lot of our data is being consumed for the sake of training many generative AI models, testing and validation. So we understand that our data oftentimes is used to test and validate many of the models, fine-tuning. Similarly, again, our data is oftentimes used to fine-tune models. and then data retrieval and real-time responses. So as models start to use methods like retrieval augmented generation, how do we optimize our data for that particular use case, which we think will end up being utilized quite a lot going forward. So the first area that we end up covering is documentation. And really for many of these recommendations, we're just thinking through how do we make our data more accessible. So when someone is trying to build a model off of our data, how can we ensure that they have direct access to that information and have direct access to the documentation? Are we ensuring that our documentation is human and machine readable, that it's in open source formats? But then how do we also ensure that it's as usable as possible? So once they actually get access to all of the documentation about our data and data assets, how do we ensure that the documentation around it is as descriptive as possible? So ultimately, we're trying to enhance the transparency and reproducibility of our data and just effectively make our documentation as interpretable as possible to be able to, drive as many meaningful patterns out of our data as possible. And again, this just supports that trying to get more accurate and robust model training a lot of the time for our documentation. For our data and metadata formats, again, we want to ensure the accessibility and usability of all of our data and metadata. So we have a lot of recommendations related to, much of the government is, the standard that we all use is DCAT version 1 right now, and then we'll be moving to DCAT version 3. And so we give a lot of recommendations within the guidelines on producing generative AI relevant metadata properties, such as the provenance and the publisher and the version, many things that aren't necessarily recommended for the government today, but we're kind of advocating for, beefing up a lot of the metadata that goes with many of our public data assets. But again, we're thinking through how do we beef up all of the things that are attached to our data and metadata in order to, create a comprehensive view into the data that we're publishing publicly, so that we don't necessarily need a human in the loop to do analysis on that data. And again, ensuring that data and metadata is as accessible as possible, and we're using commonly used open data formats, which is not necessarily the case across the board throughout our department. And then we're thinking about data storage and dissemination. So how, when a person is trying to actually get to our data, is it stored properly and is it easily retrievable? And again, this is just getting around that. How do we ensure that it is as accessible and usable as possible? And one of the core things here is when we're thinking through RAG architecture and we're trying to do kind of that real-time response, when someone asks, give me demographics of Suitland, Maryland, is it grabbing from Wikipedia, which a lot of the times it is doing today, or is it grabbing directly from our open APIs that are well set up and well developed in order to grab that statistical accurate information that is effectively live, that we're publishing live. One of the more interesting areas that we're looking into that doesn't really have much research behind it just yet is how do we ensure that the information that we're putting out, how do we effectively communicate who can use it and when they can use it and for what? And so we're thinking through this kind of question of how do we effectively communicate the licensing and usage rights of the data, public data that we're putting out to the open. Many websites today will typically, include a robots.txt file at the root of many of their websites to kind of say whether or not their websites can be crawled or not. And so we recommend that as kind of a baseline, but also adding in certain metadata properties within one's metadata related to rights and licensing. And I think ultimately, because this area is still pretty new, I haven't really come across that many copyright lawyers and people who are interested in the intersection of copyright and AI. We are hoping to kind of kick off more collaborative initiatives within the Department of Commerce to develop and update our just general data licensing and usage policies, which are a little just out of date for this, for emerging technologies now. But then also ensuring that we don't work in silos as we develop much of the language and metadata structures that we plan to use going forward. So this is a really interesting area that I particularly have been really interested in. And then finally, perfect. And then finally, we are thinking through our data quality and integrity. So we actually have seen from a lot of people that they've been, or a couple of people have been providing direct questions and effectively how to get the answer for when someone is asking, give me demographics of Suitland, Maryland, for example. We can provide the exact way to get that accurate information by hitting our APIs in a particular way and give feedback for how to actually give responses. So we go a little bit into how do you ensure, not ensure, but support the development of high quality AI systems. So basically what's next, we are attempting to get to the middle ground here. So this is kind of roughly today where ChatGPT and Copilot still are kind of giving inaccurate informations, but through this project, we've been working with Google Data Commons, which feeds into Google Gemini, and they have been doing an amazing job with making their data AI ready and providing accurate responses, which I'm happy to talk about more offline since I only have a minute left. But ultimately, our next agenda is we're going to be running AI-ready data pilots this upcoming year to test a lot of the theories that we're putting out within the guidelines. We're going to be doing more monitoring and evaluating today's models to evaluate how accurate they actually are over time, and ultimately just iterating and innovating as we go. So thank you very much.
Excellent, Victoria. Excellent. Really, really interesting work that you showed about training data, getting better results, and that you have found a roadmap towards achieving that. At least your last chart showed that on Gemini, you make good progress. By the way, UN worked very closely with the Google team also in developing it. So I think it's part of that collaboration more broadly where you see that Gemini starts to do it better because we bring in the data, metadata structures in that. Into the linked open data environment. So thank you for that. That's extremely important work that you do, and other countries can definitely benefit from that. And we will continue the conversation. Hopefully you come to Dubai, and then we can talk more with the people, because we have Meta there that comes in, but also Esri, so we can talk about these things that you talk about in more detail. I now turn to. Thank you again. I'll turn to the next presentation by Matt Weldon. Matt, you're there. Can you open up your camera so that we can see you? The presentation will be, is he there? Matt, are you there?
Can you see me?
Yeah, I cannot see you, but I see your presentation. Matt, let me allow you to indicate. Let me allow you to be introduced. His presentation is about classify AI for classifying free text to statistical classification, an important area of progress. Let me indicate that Matt joined the data science campus of the UK in September 22, and he is a senior data scientist in the synthetic data and privacy enhancing technologies squad. Prior to that, he was part of the Department of Education as an economic advisor. So here we see, the economics and the data scientists coming together in Matt. Matt, you make that presentation with others, which probably you would like to inform us about. Go ahead. You have 10 minutes, and I'll give you a cue when you have 1 minute left.
Thanks. And did you say everybody can see my presentation?
Yes.
Yeah, great. Okay, thanks very much, Ivo. So my name's Matt Weldon. I'm a senior data scientist in the Office for National Statistics in the Data Science Campus, which Osama is the director of, who you saw earlier. And I'm here to talk about work with my colleagues Jill Drumlieva, Edward Jackson, and Andy Banks from the Strategic Technologies team. I'd like to share with you our latest project, Classify AI, which focuses on embedding AI tools into survey operations. So as Young said earlier, National Statistical Institutes often need to assign free text to categories, and currently in ONS this is done in a variety of ways, including some tools such as tools provided by StatCan and Statistics Netherlands, and manual coding, a lot of manual coding. And we've estimated that manual clerical coding of statistical classifications costs the ONS more than £200,000 per year in time. So here we've explored a retrieval augmented generation approach using large language models to classify anonymized free text from labour market surveys to a standard industrial classification. The technical approach involves two main steps. So firstly, we use semantic search using a text embedding model to embed sick descriptions to query them against a short list of candidates and then produce a short list. Secondly, we use a generative large language model to pick the best candidates for the sick codes with reasoning and follow-up questions as part of the pipeline of features that we're going to implement. So what are the advantages of this approach compared to the previous machine learning approaches? So firstly, accuracy. We can achieve impressive accuracy, as I'll show you. Secondly, responsiveness to changing business needs. Because these embedding models are just a service that we call through an API, we don't need to retrain them every time the data changes. We don't need access to very large quantities of data in order to retrain them, which means that we can get ahead of the changes rather than lagging behind the changes to wait till we've collected enough data. Cost. Developing a machine learning model is costly in terms of time and expertise, whereas these services are very cheap. And the main benefit isn't really accuracy. It's about, as Osama said earlier, more rapid evolution. So how can we create processes and use tools that allow us to tighten feedback loops? Here are some preliminary results on accuracy, and these are very promising. It showed a 5 and 11 percentage point improvement over existing approaches when classifying data to the 2-digit and 5-digit sick level. And the existing approach was a machine learning model that had been developed in-house. So the initial idea of the service was we envisioned an API framework that adapted to different codes and different schemas, handled large workloads, was production ready, secure, and potentially available to external organizations such as other NSOs, Nesta, the pensions regulator, and other government departments such as the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero. The API approach is that rather than building a big piece of software, we build a URL that can accept data and can spit out a result in return. It's very lightweight, very easy to build, and very easy to adapt to different use cases. And it's worth saying that for me, the AI element is in some ways less exciting than this idea of providing products as APIs, because this is what allows us to iterate faster and evolve faster. And this was the initial idea, and is still the core of the project. When we met with our users, our first user group, we quickly realized that they needed something a bit more than that. They needed something that could work with a human in the loop, and the human in the loop needed to have tools that enabled them to work fast, to look at the LLM generated responses and to check that they were correct quickly. So because we had an API, the API enabled us to very quickly build an app on the front of the API that uses the responses and has tools such as keyboard shortcuts, rapid sorting, filtering, so that the human user could quickly check the results and validate them. And that's really a benefit of the microservice approach we adopted. In terms of architecture, this was implemented in Google Cloud. All of the code was held in a GitHub repo, and using CI/CD pipelines, we were able to build the entire infrastructure. Each time we make a change to the source code, we have build triggers. The app lives in App Engine in Google Cloud and has a fast API endpoint that contains all the core logic. The API endpoint then in turn does some cleaning and then calls Gemini large language models and text embedding APIs, which are provided by Google. So it's all API based. The front end is a Python Flask app which has a JavaScript, HTML, and CSS front end that lives in the user's browser, so that when the user is actually interacting with the data, it's all local and all held locally, which improves performance and responsiveness. In order to handle the sort of uncertainty and to ensure the quality of results, we're implementing an uncertainty quantification method known as conformal prediction. Conformal prediction allows us, using some training data, some labeled data, conformal prediction allows us to give distribution-free accuracy guarantees that are correct in repeated sampling. So those accuracy thresholds allow us to scale the amount of results returned to the user, so that, for example, if the model is very certain, the app will return fewer results, and if the model is less certain, the app will return more results. And if the model is over a threshold of certainty, then the app will just assign a SIC code, and then the human can then review that later. So conformal prediction is a very flexible framework, a statistical framework that acts as a wrapper around the black box of the large language model to allow us to make statistical inferences about the uncertainty in the black box. The principles we're working to, according to, are firstly security, so that classifier has to be built using secure architectures, authentication, encryption, etc. Efficiency, it has to be something that the users want to use, and we're working on the principle that the users will have to buy this. We're not pushing it on them. Quality, it has to produce accurate results. And sustainability, which means for us that it has to be something that doesn't have a large maintenance burden, that we will be able to continue to improve and iterate on quickly and easily. So just quickly, I'll talk through some challenges we've faced. Firstly, the data that is being used is low sensitivity, but it is personal data, so we have to it belongs to the firm, so we have to protect that data. Similarly to what Wesley was saying earlier, one of our biggest problems is securing access to the platforms that we need, the Google Cloud platforms, and negotiating access to those with our IT department. Ensuring that the result is consistent is difficult, because sometimes it's not consistent with previous results because it's an improvement, but that still is a very difficult thing to introduce into a statistical pipeline, any kind of discontinuous change, even if it's an improvement. So there's a lot of stakeholder engagement and work we have to do with downstream customers and then their customers, and then all the way down the line to ensure that we don't create any difficulties downstream. And finally, we just found that everything in a national statistical organization is very tightly coupled. Everybody has to have a say in every single decision, and that creates a lot of well, it delays and it slows everything down. So in summary, just to go back to what Osama was saying about evolving faster, we think that the core thing of this project is not AI so much as the working practices we've adopted to evolve faster, and what we're learning about what evolving faster means in the context of an organization that has a lot of risks, is very risk averse for very good reasons, and has a lot of tightly coupled dependencies between different business areas. And it's really solving those problems that will unlock AI, and AI will help to solve those problems. Thanks. Any questions? Oh, sorry,
Excellent.
No questions. In the chat, please.
Sorry, but welcome.
Yeah.
But absolutely brilliant presentation again. I see a lot of sharing that same sentiment. There you go. Fascinating. And what I see, this can be made available through GitHub, right? Because others can make that available. Is that
So we have
the possibility as we grow and start to share this knowledge?
Absolutely, yeah. So there is a GitHub repo available, which is an earlier iteration, a prototype of what we're doing, which we will drop into the chat. And the current code base that we're working on will be made available at the end of the project.
Excellent. Thank you for that. We move on to make sure that we give everybody an equal space. And with that, I thank you again, Matt, for this presentation, along with your colleagues from the Data Science Camps of the UK. Great work. I had the privilege of introducing my friend from the Food and Agriculture Organization, Carola Fabi, who has been working tirelessly on a product called Caliber, which is now becoming increasingly part of a knowledge network. And I'm looking forward to that presentation. I know a little bit more about that in my previous function as Director of Economic Statistics. Classification was part of my work, and in that context, Carola and our teams worked together. She will tell a little bit more about that. Carola is Senior Statistician at FAO, where she leads the methodological innovation team. She contributed to the FAO Data Lab, that is basically the data science and big data environment for the FAO. She has 30 years of experience, so she comes with an enormous amount of knowledge in this particular area. Carola, the floor is yours. You have 10 minutes. I'll cue you when the last minute goes in. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Ivo. Good morning, good afternoon to everyone. So yes, like Ivo said, what I'm going to present is the current status of a tool that FAO has developed in the past several years, and the status of an ongoing dialogue that started with Ivo himself on international classifications. So I'm very pleased to be here. It's not directly linked to artificial intelligence, but somehow it really flows in well with what we have just heard. So let me see. Did the presentation?
No, it is about the basic infrastructure, Carola. I think you're very much at the heart of the matter. So go ahead.
So it's a wide audience. So for those of you who have never heard of it, what is Caliper? Caliper is a set of open link tools and methodologies to manage statistical classifications and code lists along their entire life cycle. So design, editing, maintenance, use, and dissemination. And since 2022, it is the FAO's dissemination platform for statistical classifications. And so currently we are discussing and implementing, it's part of a partnership with the United Nations Statistics Division, and Caliper is now hosted on the UN Global Platform infrastructure. I mean, the driving idea, the driving principle is really that statistical metadata, classifications, and standards are public goods, and they should be treated as such. So be open, be accessible, be readable, and so on. One sentence about the global platform, just for the few of you who may not have heard or have seen it yet. It's a cloud service ecosystem to support international collaboration in the development of official statistics, organized in regional and sector hubs. And so Caliper is currently hosted in one of the hubs, one of the sector hubs by the Basque Center for Climate Change, called BC3, as part of their collaboration with the United Nations on the system of environment and economic accounting. So right now, Caliper is changing skin, is mutating into a network of resources, and possibly a network of partners, with the vision, the mission to extend the usability and the interoperability of all international classifications for official statistics. So not directly artificial intelligence, but trying to act as the glue for a lot of the cross-domain, cross-sectoral, interagency data use that is made. Right now, so what is happening? Because we're really talking about the deployments, it's now becoming real. We have two instances on the hub, a production instance for public dissemination with a complete free access, and a development instance which is meant for the upstream phases of classification life cycles. So for the development, the population, the data modeling, the testing, the editing, and it has, of course, login with authentication. We have Dockerized this suite of tools that manage the various phases of the cycle. So eventually Caliper can also be deployed easily in on other infrastructures. The role of FAO is to lead, develop, and coordinate the updates and the testing in this 2-year pilot that has just started with the United Nations Statistics Division. So the architecture is, let's say, can be described in 3 main parts. There is a bench, so a workbench called Workbench for the maintenance of the classifications, with a web-based editor that manages the workflow, that can manage the validation, the versioning of the classifications and their history. There is a database, Fusaki, for the online queries to the database through a Sparkle endpoint, with the possibility of building REST APIs. And then on the dissemination side, there is an interface for dissemination to humans with a web browser and a customizable user interface. And of course, data, so classifications can be downloaded in the most common formats. And here are some of the open formats. So in the end, what is it? I mean, a network of resources. I mean, we all know that, I mean, statistical classifications are by nature linked objects. And in fact, there can be a web of classifications that are linked to one another in various ways. Either they evolve over time with new versions, they spin off one from the other. For example, regional classifications that are more specialized or more representative than a global classification, or some sector classification that go deeper from a more general classification. Other classifications are related for their scope. So there can be, as we see in this particular graph, several classifications that just describe products, and more specifically, food and agricultural products. And so Caliper helps managing the various classifications, but also their interlinkages. I mean, a very simple example, for example, a product like pineapple that can belong to several classifications, and how to link them easily and update the links, or a given crop like sugarcane that is very important as a product, but is also that has also an item in the classification of economic activities. So in fact, the same concept can be repeated in different schemes with different codes, with different descriptors. And the Caliper approach helps connecting all these schemes and descriptors. So in the end, the idea is that classifications go beyond having a mere relational database. It's more than that. It's about open data, it's about linking data, and it's about making the metadata findable, accessible, interoperable, and usable with an infrastructure that supports modeling and querying linked resources with a uniform and standard interface. So we follow standards in terms of web technologies, in terms of data models, in terms of metadata schemes, in terms of open formats, and of open source software. This is the one current examples and use cases for ARIES, where, for Caliper, where ARIES has a programmatic access to Caliper. ARIS for the system of environmental and economic account is based on semantic programming, where they delegate the definition of the single items of the individuals, that could be the single items in a classification, to so-called authorities, that in this case would be the custodians of the classifications. There are, several examples of custodians, the UPAC, the GBIF, and the World Resource-Based Soil Classifications. And for example, ARIS is already programmatically using Caliper as the authority for crops. But in reality, Caliper is also hosting the World Reference-Based Soil Classifications, so also for the soil classification. So where are we going from there? This is a network of resources, and what we are looking for with United Nations Statistics Division and with BC3 is to expand that to a network of partners, and so to bring a larger number of classifications into the Caliper, possibly the whole international family of statistical classifications, and to offer in turn a uniform programmatic interface for better data reuse, for data integration, for data interoperability, through an off-the-shelf and open source suite of tools that was already developed, and therefore that is already available. And we are looking really to have a potentially large community of users, first of all, to increasing the access to classification and increasing the quality of the metadata that are so necessary for a good performance by artificial intelligence. And an even larger community of potential users. All this under an agreed governance where the custodians would be, or the partners would keep control of their data and of the editorial workflow. And this is it, and I hope I was in the 10 minutes. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. You kept on time. I didn't even call you for 1 minute. Thank you for that, Carola. I think this is fabulous work. It took a lot of years of development, Carola, and you have been a driving force behind it. So congratulations on bringing it now in an area where I think everybody is looking at reproducible pipelines. What I find very important to say, Carola, that this is the first example that we start to digitize international standards. This one is on classification. It uses linked open data, in the semantic web, which I really believe in, is the infrastructure that we should build to guide, the large language models and so on in a more easily interpretable way, which is then also ensuring quality. And your work will hopefully be picked up by the ONS, for example, that they start to use your REST API and incorporating that in there. But of course, they have to make their adjustment to the country sort of classifications. But thank you for showing us where you are, and that this takes flight. This work, and congratulations with that. In open source tools, it is FAIR principles, so you have demonstrated that this is all very feasible, building that knowledge network and the infrastructure. So Fabio, congratulations. I think this is a major achievement that you have demonstrated. With that, Carola, I thank you. I now go to a break. That break will last us only 5 minutes. So I'll take you back in at 9:10 for 2 more presentations. So for 5 minutes, we will now resume at 9:10. You can turn off your, stay on, don't disconnect, stay on, go for a walk and stretch a little bit and come back, and we will be productive. See you in 5 minutes. 9:10, we restart with the presentation from Pimentel. All right, I think we hopefully all back. We're still doing great in the amount of people that are there. I hope we are re-energized with this small break. I have the privilege of introducing Alejandro Pimentel. Alejandro, he's from the INEGI, that is Statistical Office of Mexico. He is their Deputy Director, Research in Data Science. He is also an economist with the data science sort of tool development in him, which is an interesting combination that we see increasingly happening, that people start to use the data and artificial intelligence, and they combine their economic background with the data science background, which is an interesting development. With that short introduction, Alejandro, the floor is yours. The presentation is about leveraging open source language models for automatic codification of employment and economic activity in household survey. So we're really looking forward to that presentations, how that work came about and with the technology that you applied. Alejandro, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. A pleasure. Thank you for having me here. Good morning. And yes, I'm going to talk about how in Mexico we are leveraging these language models for codification. I am going to be presenting some projects that we are using AI algorithms to assist on coding tasks. Our projects are mainly focused on improving the efficiency of this survey process. We are targeting occupation and economic activity with these classification frameworks. It's the NAICS, the North American Industry Classification System, and the CINCO, the National Occupational Classification System. These are both essential for ensuring accurate and standardized data in our programs. And we focus on these two main topics, occupation and economic activity, because are key components of various of our surveys. Surveys that we have been gained valuable experience as we apply new technologies and explore better ways to use our results. We started with the NIC survey, the National Survey of Household Income and Expenditure, and later on, we work on the NOE, the National Survey of Occupation and Employment. And even now, currently, we are working on the Intercensal Survey, which is a work in progress. I'm going to talk more about the experience with the first two surveys. So first of all, the challenge, as we may all know, is that for this kind of statistical surveys, coding is often done manually, and this involves hiring and training a lot of people. It's labor intensive and time consuming. It requires a significant amount of human resources. This is also prone to human error. So the solution to address these challenges, what we are trying to do is use AI to automate these coding tasks so that we can reduce the manual workload and also improve accuracy and moreover consistency in this process. So to start off, it's important to say that in all these three surveys, the original method that we are using is a process of two main phases. The first one, we use deterministic algorithms that are rules, primarily focused on vocabulary. These are meticulous studied rules that have regular updates and are very effective, but they cannot be applied to all the elements. Only those records that match any of these rules can be coded by this strategy. And then the second phase is the manual codification, where the trained personnel read the descriptions and tag with the appropriate code that description. Finally, we do a rigorous quality validation, and if the batch fails to meet the minimum standard, it is returned again for another round of manual coding. In the artificial intelligence solution, what we are doing is incorporate a third phase, and an intermediate stage between the deterministic rules and the manual coding. Now, theoretically, we can code everything with the AI solution, but this approach is not really advisable. It is very important to have a confidence score so that we can trust our data. As an institute, our priority is with the trust and quality of the data we publish. So we need this confidence score in order to balance the number of records coded by the artificial intelligence and the quality that can be achieved. And with this in mind, we developed the models for our surveys. The NX survey was the first that in which we explored deep learning codes for coding. We started this system with embeddings training our own database, our own documents that of course contain related words that are important for the institute, and that we have already the answers from previous years in the descriptions of previous surveys. So that was a very, very important source for training in these embeddings. This data, of course, wasn't as extensive as we would like, and we also use Wikipedia as an external source. And once we have this embedding trained, we focus on processing the survey itself. We collected two types of data: the descriptions, and the language that is models, and contain the most information for assigning the code. But also the metadata is important with details such as company size or activity location. Now, the main input for the word embedding models was, of course, the descriptions. We use fast text to use subword information in order to be able to work with out of vocabulary terms. And we obtain a representation word by word in a sequence, resulting in a sequence of variable length for each description. So to get a fixed length vector for the entire description, for the entire sentence, we use a bidirectional gated recurrent unit. Finally, the outputs from this module was combined with the metadata into a softmax classifier to get both the most likely code and the confidence score that I was talking about. This was for the first survey. Later, for the second survey, for an OA, we upgraded our system using a model based on transformer technology. Specifically, we use the BERT, the Uncase BERT base in Spanish. That's a model that follows the BERT architecture. That means it has 12 layers and 12 attention heads with a hidden size of 768 for approximately 110 million parameters. We use this architecture because our experiments show a better performance compared with other architectures like Roberta or even multilingual versions. However, those differences in reality are quite little in comparisons to the data that we use for training. I'm going to talk about that a little further. Once again, the output of the model is fed to a softmax layer to produce the most probable score, the most probable code, and a confidence score. Now, the goal, as we remember, is not to replace everything that is done manually. It's just to select the most confident records so that we have a threshold trade-off. If we label all of our records with our system, we can have something like a 74% match with manual labeling. But if we only label 20% of our records, this match goes up to 97%, almost 90x%. So thanks to this threshold, we gain a couple of advantages. For instance, it reduced the impact of imbalanced data, because of course our data is imbalanced, and this tends to bias the systems toward most frequent classes. However, our goal is to save on the total numbers. So the ones that will be automatically labeled, the more frequent, will be less impacted by this imbalance, while the most or the less frequent, the most impact by the imbalance will continue to be labeled manually. And another advantage is that this score provides a better tool for analysis when adjusting the expected savings against quality. So this offers more information for decision taking. In this regard, for our first survey, for the NIC survey, we were able to we had a special opportunity of analysis. We were able to run the automatic label strategy, and also in parallel an expert labeling strategy for a good evaluation and comparison between these two elements, so that we could adjust the thresholds for even 10% in variation.
Alejandro, sorry, column, 1 minute left. Okay.
In the expected savings. And this experiment was very interesting because we could test the p-value for the McNemar test to see which was better, if the automatic system or the manual system. And we found that there was a range, a sweet spot or a sweet range, where the automatic system was clearly better than the manual encoding. However, as we increase in the savings, it also once again the easiest records were also very easy for the humans to tag. For the second survey, for the NOE, we didn't have this kind of opportunity.
I have to stop you, Alejandro.
Okay, sorry.
To give space to others. Can you conclude?
Of course. Also, to conclude, our final remarks, we were comparing these models, these new models. However, the most changes, the changes more persistent, the bigger performance change was with the data, with the quality of the data, more than even the change of models from deep learning to transformer models. That is one of the final remarks that I was going to make. Thank you very much.
Excellent, Alejandro. Very, very, very interesting work. And of course, we had to start comparing your work with work that was done by Matt. Congratulations in showing the improvements that you can make on a major survey, and the cross-cutting work that you are able to achieve. With that, Alejandro, sorry for cutting you short, and my apologies for that, but that's my role as moderator. I now quickly move to the final presentation, which is by Vitas Valziotis and Oliver Cirello. I hope you are on the call. They will talk to us about generative AI and official statistics, a large program or project, as they call it, run by the Economic Commission of Europe, high-level group on the modernization of official statistics. Just briefly, Vitas, he is from CSO Ireland, and he leads the data science department. He is the lead data scientist. And then Oliver, who joined the monetary economic department of the Bank of International Settlement in 2022, and he came from the Banque de France and from a postgraduate teaching position at Sciences Po in Paris, a very prominent institution. With that, I don't know who's making the presentation, maybe both. Somehow you have to summarize this in 5 minutes, whoever going to make the introduction, the presentation.
Thanks, Ivo. I think I will start and then hand over to Vitas, and 5 minutes will be really sharp, but we'll try to do our best. Thanks.
No, I understand.
No, indeed, a lot has been said already. Very interesting presentation, and Kyung already introduced a bit the scope of this project, which is under the high-level group for modernization of official statistics, and that Vitas and myself are co-chairing. Just to proceed with the presentation, of course, this is the tip of the iceberg, the top of the iceberg, because the project is really assembling a lot of organization. You can see in the screen 13 statistical offices, central banks, academia as well. We have 3 international organizations, of course, many members. You can see on the screen. Let me also thank Amelina. I think she's on the call. She's also managing this project on the UNC side, along with Kyung, and they're doing really great job. To go into the bulk of the presentation, basically to summarize really high level, what we're trying to do is 3 things. One, to document the application, that is use cases and current implementation of generative AI in official statistics, and there are really many. The second one, perhaps also more importantly, is what we expect from generative AI. And Kyung already mentioned, so I won't spend too much time on this, but we ran an international survey for the Conference of European Statisticians earlier this year, specifically to shed light on this aspect. And of course, needless to say, we also want to document and take stock of the challenges, limitations, and risks that this new frontier technology is posing. So what you're currently drafting now is a report on generative AI in official statistics. And this is a little bit the goal of this presentation, is to give you a very quick summary of what we are currently cooking. But before doing this and handing over to Vitas, let me just tell you two short things. Before actually going to the report, we had a stock taking exercise, and this actually was basically 3 things. One, of course, to define and setting up a template for sharing and classifying use cases. The result of this preliminary work, if we can call it this way, is actually the creation of a UNC repository. It's already public. You can see the listed use cases there. And of course, there is the survey for DCES. You have a QR code there, and you can browse the result. And then very quickly, this is the helicopter view of the chapter. Basically, what we're looking at is 2 things. One is 2 sides of the coin, if I may say. One is the governance aspect of generative AI, and the other one is the technical one, the implementation one. And so we are structuring the report along 6 chapters. One is on building organizational capability. That's the first one. The second one is on using and implementing generative AI. The other 2 chapters are governing and managing the projects, but also to mitigate and monitoring the risks. And finally, we conclude the report on 2 chapters, one on sharing and the other one on preparing for the future, looking beyond what actually we are currently living. So with that, I hand over to Vitas. I guess, Vitas, for the sake of rapidity, because we really have time running out, I leave you the rest of the presentation. And many thanks again, Ivo, for hosting us today.
Thank you very much.
Thank
So
you.
I'll very quickly take over because of the time. Cool. So thank you very much. So this part of the presentation, as Olivier said, like, all the slides that are to follow, this is like, all of the part of our report and what will be in the report. And just to say, like, this report will be made public, and it's gearing up to be like a fairly big report, and all of these words and things being mentioned here are either sections or subsections of the report, right? I'm also very happy to hear that a lot of the things that has been mentioned in today, we actually addressing them. We actually providing answers and clarity. We don't have all the answers, but there's a lot of clarity in this report, right? So just to go, making data AI ready was being said multiple times, and that's what we're seeing as well, like, how to make the data AI ready, and that can be covered in the report. Also, technology, preparing for unstructured data, that's also an important. And then we have the governance. That's a very big aspect on the report, and we have, like, dedicated chapters dedicated, like, how to deal with the governance. There's a lot there. Another big thing, skills. people need to become AI literate, and we talk about skill set, and I have a little bit more in the very end. A lot of it also the cultural, working with AI, breaking down silos, etc. And last but not least, when dealing with AI, legal aspects comes into play, because in some instances, there's some small legal issues, but we address that as well. So we'll go to the next slide, please. All right. So these are very high levels that are in the report, where to use generative AI, right? In which places, where to use them, where not to use them. And as Olivier said, as a part of the survey, and all of the use cases have been made public, we already seen over 24 use cases within the context of statistical organization, which is quite a lot within the space of 2 years, I would say. Then we cover the more technical thing, how to implement Gen AI, and there's lots of ways that can be done through a service provider, open source, in-house, outside of the house, in the cloud, etc. Criteria for using generative AI. But a lot of things, sometimes because they're cool to use does not mean it's should be used. So for the use case, does it add value? Is it actually practical to use generative AI in that use case? And we also address that. Now, the next thing is prompt engineering. Anyone that used generative AI, would be well aware of that term, is how to interact with the generative AI, and we have a big section on that. How basically communicate with generative AI effectively as a user. It's basically all through language. And we also deal on multiple languages as well.
Matt, you have 1 minute to conclude. Yeah.
Okay, 1 minute to conclude. Okay, so governing and managing. So as again, all of this is going to be in the report, adapting structures and frameworks, finding the balance between the top-down and bottom-up approaches, and also ethics come into play as well. So I'm going to very quickly go through the next slide. Next slide. Okay, mitigating and monitoring. That's another very big chapter, how to monitor all of the AIs and social costs, etc., etc., etc. So I quickly go to the next slide. Sharing. With all of this work that we do, we want to share. So we basically have a chapter dedicated to sharing, and embracing open source here is very useful to us, to share with. So we're trying to make as much as possible open source, and this report will be shared as well. Next slide, please. Preparing for the future. This is future. We keep evolving another chapter, and we address all of the things, and have a small section there, new threats. Very, very important. What's changing here is how human is interacting with the computer. No longer maybe typing, spoken language, so on. So very big part of the report. Next slide. Okay, that is it. So for the sake of the time is precious. That's why I run so quickly. But as I said, all of this is a report, and we're going to make it available, and we're going to be releasing report in small chapter, well, not small, in chapters individually, and it will be made public. And we're also going to be releasing full report in Q2, I believe, next year. Thank you very much.
Excellent. That was one of the questions. You answered that from Ronald. When do you release it? But I understand you progressively release it, probably also for consultation. So excellent. This is very important work that you guys have been doing in bringing that together in a document in a more systematic way. So congratulations on this work. I will not go any further here on this side. Well, I'll probably stay here, Ronald, right? You're up. So basically, we all stay now here, and then we will bring Ronald into play, because Ronald will moderate the closing panel. Ronald, with that, I can hand over, but not before I thank all of the presenters, because I think this was really, really very valuable. And it shows that these sprints are extremely good to have, to share all this knowledge and see where people are at this point. Ronald, the floor is yours to moderate the final panel.
Yeah, so we're waiting, I think, for the other session to come back. I have not seen them. Is that correct, Maria? Or Maria is on the other side still. Clarence, can you call? Can you call them in?
With her, And
Okay,
they're
can you
finishing.
call them
I
in?
told her we're done, so she's
All
wrapping
right.
them up. Yep.
So Ivo, you are faster.
You know, Ronald,
So-
we have to run fast as Dutch. We're a small country.
That's right. That's right. That's right. I fully, by the way, concur with you, Ivo, about the excellent presentations that we have had so far, or that we have had in this sprint. And of course, I have not seen the presentations in the other sessions. For one thing, also for everyone to know, all the presentations will be made available on our website. We do this as soon as we can, so we try to get it up by tomorrow. We also have the recordings, both of this side, so the session that you may have followed in session 3, but we also have a recording of session 4, and both of the recordings will be up for those who also want to have a look at that. But again, stressing the point that we have very good presentations. We also see that there is a lot of work going on, that the work is advancing very well. Yeah, I think I take also the point that it's good to have this sprint to know who is working on what, right? So that we stay aware of where things are happening, and that we keep talking to each other about that. Let me see if Luis, are you back?
Yes, I'm back. Yes, sorry for the delay, but we are back.
Okay. So we're going into the last bit of the sprint. We do a kind of a closing. We have about 20 minutes for this. So we'll do one round of views on what we have heard today, and immediately I will ask also for those who are part of this final panel discussion to indicate what they expect or what they would like to see happening in our in-person event at the symposium in Dubai. So we have Ivo and Luis who moderated session 3 and session 4 respectively. We have Mohammed here, and I see that we have Osama also here. So the way I want to go about it is I will first ask Ivo and Luis to give a little bit feedback of their session, addressing also the questions which we had sort of developed before about where the sprint and the content of the sprint sits with questions around the relevance of national statistical offices, the questions around ethics versus innovation about this kind of progress on use of AI and data science for official statistics. Also a question which has not come as much to the fore in the presentations, which is about what they call global equity. Is there discrepancies, disparities between statistical offices around the world in being able to use AI and data science for official statistics, and how could we make sure that no one or no statistical office is left behind in these kinds of developments? And then finally, as I said, if you could indicate what you think would be very good topics to address in more depth when we are getting together in Dubai in about a month from now. So I will start with Ivo, and then Luis, and then I'll go to Osama, and then I'll give Mohammed as the last and the host of the symposium as the last one to address those questions. Ivo, please.
Yeah, thank you, Ronald. I will be brief, not doing justice to the wealth of substance that came out of these presentations. So everybody, please go to them and read them carefully and connect with the authors of them. Victoria Huet from the Department of Commerce, she talked about the work that is done federally, I think, at the Commerce Department on guidelines for AI-ready data. they have set up a working group on AI and open data to ensure that the AI-generated boxes, chat boxes, or how they come about, Gemini and so on, generative AI, how they use the data and how they interpret the data and see the accuracy of the data as they start reading the databases and other documents that come about. They have developed and are on the development of a strategy where they will start to use large language models in training those models on these data. They are testing and validating that, and also they look at data retrieval from these databases. And what is very important in the sense that they use, of course, the open data an open source environment to make data more accessible and interpretable. What I found fascinating from the various comparison that Gemini is doing it better. Now, I'm not promoting Google, but I said probably it has to do with also work that UNSD is doing in actually developing with the UN data a metadata environment in which this data is structured or more trained in applying this to statistics and statistical databases, as well as to international standards. So, but that's something to be looked at. Maybe there is some sort of cross-fertilization taking place while one does better than the other. I turn to the second one, which is on done by Matt, which I will combine with Alejandro's presentation, which was very much around the issue of classification. Classification is a very time-consuming and labor-intensive process, and it's prone to error. Can we do better, and can we save money? Matt mentioned a number of £200,000 of savings that they are trying to put into place by using their particular sort of techniques of using generative AI. The benefits are, as they have shown, improved accuracy, improved quality. That is definitely a major sort of outcome. The conclusions I found interesting from both of them. It's not so much about the technique of artificial intelligence and generational AI. A lot of that is an evolution of use of technology, but but of course very useful to use, and so the use of that is definitely determined. But what they felt was more something we have to talk about is getting access to the client environment, for instance, Gemini, so that they can use these sort of techniques. So they see AI as a continuous step in improvement of technology, not a discontinuous step. But other challenges are more in terms of access to platforms. They think stakeholder dialogue is quite essential in using this, because that's where the showstoppers comes. It takes more time. It's not so much developing the tools, but more about the use of the tool. So it talks about training and teaching and communicating around these tools. It is also important to keep testing the consistency of these models in downstream use of these production processes. So these are the two that we had on classification. We had a presentation by Carola on Calibre, which is, in my opinion, a leap forward in the use of international classifications as an international standard that will develop what I think a robust knowledge infrastructure around official statistics that we start to develop, which is part also, in my opinion, that will help us to interpret data better through our large language models. It can really structure and the interpretation of the data. They are working on that and have installed it on the global platform and the redo platform of the Basque Institute. And I think that's a very important aspect. She says they will develop REST APIs that basically can then be used, for instance, in work like we have seen done by Mexico and the UK on classifications. So we see that there has to be further dialogue in actually developing the structural infrastructure in countries' applications of improving the use of codes in surveys and really generate significant cost reductions. Finally, we had a presentation by Vitas and Oliver, a very important program on the modernization of official statistics, the program by the European Commission of Europe. They particularly looked at, of course, the AI generation for official statistics. They have a huge stock-taking activity, which I think is very important in understanding the applications, in terms of understanding the use cases related to these applications, the expectations and the challenges. So they've done a lot of interviews and a lot of surveys to get these opinions going forward. A report will be issued progressively, chapter by chapter, covering governance and technological issues around data, technology, governance, around legal aspects, around culture, and not to forget capacity building and skill development. So all this will come together online. I stop here, Ronald.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ivo. Luis, 5 minutes for.
Yeah, thank you. No, thanks so much. It was really a very interesting set of discussions, and time is always what we miss. So a few key takeaways from me. So we're in this group on dissemination, the use of LLMs for dissemination and communication, and I think it is clear the why, as we heard at the beginning. This is an opportunity to bring statistics to the users, to solve real world problems, to ensure that the statistical work has real impact. And we also see from the examples that it is not a question anymore about whether the technology works. We see the solutions actually working. So it is not anymore about the why. It's not about the what are the applications. I think it's more now about how we scale this and what is how is the proper way of doing these things. So one of the most interesting aspects for me in these discussions that we had today were about the need to work differently, organize differently in the statistical offices, so that you ensure that there is always the human in the middle, the domain expert, the ethical, responsible human, the governance part of it in every step of the process, and bringing teams that are truly multidisciplinary to work together in ways that we were not used to. We were not used to work in these ways before. No? So I think that's one of the aspects that I would like to see more discussion about in the symposium, in terms of how to do this now with different organizational structures, different culture of agility, of user engagement, stakeholder engagement, throughout the whole process. One more thing is that the domain expertise is clearly needed when we talk about LLMs or this generative AI. These are models that are used for very general kind of applications. No, so to ground them into the specific applications and that we want to build, we need to also continue doing the work that we have been doing in official statistics forever, which is structuring knowledge, bringing structure to the knowledge. So it's not only now use the unstructured text documents, it's how to combine them with all the fine granularity of statistical classifications, of data schemas that enable these LLMs to be grounded in factual curated expertise. And finally, on the digital divide, let's say, one thing that caught my attention too is that the LLMs, that's the experience of Mexico, seem to be working always better in English now. So multilingualism is something that we still need to work on, like how to make LLMs work for every kind of language. So thank you.
Thanks, Luis. Yeah, thank you for that last remark also. And I want to bring that Osama, you're with us? Osama? I see Osama and a mic open, but I don't know if Osama is actually here. Or maybe we lost him. So I will then go
Can
to.
you hear me now?
Oh yeah, now I can hear you. Yes, so you are there. Yes.
Okay. Yes.
All right. So to you, Osama. So what? In general, so you take away on the topics of NSO staying relevant, the issues around ethics, and then also how can we make sure that this is for all statistical offices, and what you would like to see happening in Dubai. Please go ahead.
Yeah. So what I like to see happen in Dubai, various things. One, I think I would like a reiteration and an explanation, and there are experts around various NSOs that actually you do not need to work in the cloud to be able to do this sort of stuff, right? And that is even in terms of using LLM models. So there are the open LLM models that we know about, you know, ChatGPT, Vertex, Claude, but a whole bunch. But actually, you can implement LLM algorithms on an on-premise system and do things that way with your own training data. So it's not a. I think cloud works better for various reasons in terms of scalability. But I would like us to make clear that actually, even if you can't, some NSOs, I think they have restrictions in their countries around working in the cloud. So actually, you don't have. So that's one thing. I think I would like also us to address some of the risk aversion issues. So everyone hears about hallucinations and things like that. What you hear is this, what I call the existence of errors greater than zero, right? So there are, of course, going to be errors. LLMs are going to put out incorrect answers every now and then, right? That is not the appropriate benchmark. Humans, other code, everything else puts out incorrect errors. So we need to somehow move away from the LLMs every now and then put out an error, therefore we can't use them issue, to actually what is the safe way in which you can use LLMs, and actually they can perhaps improve on the performance of what you are using. I'll give you just an example, right? So a lot of NSOs use OCR software for scanning receipts to get prices, information, things like that. We've started testing using just Google Lens, grabbing a picture, and then AI. That's quite interesting. So the AI is actually turning out to be more accurate, right? The LLMs, because OCRs just work on, they vectorize the bitmap and say, aha, that's an A. And sometimes if it's fuzzy, they can't do that. Okay, and you can see me from an angle now. Okay, fine.
I can see you, and you have a very, very interesting background. But go ahead.
It's Christmas, and that's Star Wars, so Merry Christmas, everyone. Where was I? I mentioned on so a method for some guidance on how you can. So I was saying, LLM is turning out to be more get better results because they don't just work on the bitmap, but the rasterization, the vectorization of the bitmap. They actually are predictive in terms of, hang on, we think this is going to be the word, or it's probably going to be that, right? So they're actually finding that this stuff is looking like it's more accurate than using OCR and cheaper. I mean, kind of that's a win, right? And so there's that, and from the use cases we've got, use these fantastic use cases we have seen over the last 2 webinars to bring out sort of guidance on some of these issues, right? So you use the webinar, the use cases as the basis. Look what you can do. And then actually some guidance on, you don't have to do this necessarily in the cloud, but it's a lot easier. Guidance on how do you evaluate this stuff, guidance on safety, guidance on things like, you've got to train your people up in prompt engineering, because if you actually think through the prompts rather than just some naive thing, and you use train of thought prompts, you get better results. There's a whole bunch of things around the training stuff and everything else that's needed. This is quite practical stuff, and I would like to see some of that come in at the seminar. And I just got one link that I'm going to paste in the chat, which is a really good. Ethan Mollick is worth following on LinkedIn. Any recent? Oh yeah. Oh god, that's just gone through our. Oh, there it is. His work. He's an academic at University of Pennsylvania. He's worth following if you're interested in AI. And actually, he's just done a quick guide and sorts of things that you should use AI for, and sort of things you really shouldn't. Worth reading.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Osama, for these interesting thoughts and interesting topics, which we can pick up and going in a more interactive in-person discussion while in Dubai. So talking about Dubai, Mohammed, you will be hosting that event. Your thoughts about today, the webinar, and your thoughts about what you would like to see happening in Dubai. Mohammed, please.
Thank you, Ronald. And first of all, let me thank all the presenters today. I think very interesting content that has been presented. And actually, there are three things if I would like to cover or see in more depth and details maybe in Dubai is, one is, as you mentioned, the ethical concern is where the AI usage in official statistics, how can it be transparent and how can we really not compromise the individual rights? And that takes me to Osama's point where he mentions, can we really put these tools in a premise? So we need to see some of these practices that has been I would say, put in production. How can we really use that across all the statistical offices? Because today is what we talk is, this is the example of how we do it. But when actually that, again, goes back to the point where Louis' mission is, how can we really systemize these things and we start using it in productions? We haven't seen yet a comparison, or if I want to compare a country to other countries, if I don't really use the same methodology, I will not be able to really produce the same type of data. And that's the issue, or that's the methodology where we do in statistics. We produce quality data based on standard and methodology. So would like to see a couple of realistic implementation, not only this is a proof of concept or a POC, but we want to see something that can be really implemented across all the National Statistic Office. The last point is, maybe it will be great is to see the integration of these implementation into the traditional methodology of the statistics. Again, Louis mentioned, yes, we will continue this, the statistics dissemination, but at the same time, how can we really start merging these practices in our day-to-day statistics? We haven't seen yet a proper dissemination of such, I would say, I don't want to call it a proof of concept, but these trials into a statistical systems. We don't have it in our statistical production. So what I would like to see is that how can we really take these nowadays and put them in standards and start producing these as statistics? And it should actually use either the LLM or one of these tools or generative AI and or any other tools. So how can we really integrate this AI with the traditional statistic methodology that can be really challenging? And AI and often AI generates predictions, and as we've seen maybe in the first session or the second sessions, if we use one type of tool versus other, we see different numbers. Then the third tool might use or might give us a correct number. So how can we really try to integrate that with our statistical dissemination system and that become a standard, and the methodology should become really a methodology that has been adopted by all the national statistic offices?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mohammed, for these final comments. Yeah, we need to have like this quality assurance framework on top of the work that we are doing, so that we can also compare it across various offices, both within the country and certainly also then between countries. With this, we're getting to the end of this very interesting sprint webinar. I think I just repeat what everyone was saying. This is a very high quality, very interesting presentations. I would like to thank everyone for that. I think we had a good start by In-kyung and Wesley sort of setting the stage, and then a number of use cases which shows that that work is progressing. We are on a good path. There are also what Vitas and Olivier were doing. There is a stock taking about what is going on, and there will be reports published to share with everyone, and we will come together hopefully with many of us in Dubai at the end of January to further discuss this topic. And we are working with the Data Science Leaders Network under the leadership of Osama. We're working on a playbook how to integrate data science and AI, I would say, in the work of statistical officers, and we'll try to see how we can make good progress on that in our event in Dubai. With that, thank you very much. Again, the presentations and recordings will be on the website very soon. I thank you all for participating, for attending this, and yes, exciting in this new area of work to move forward. So thank you very much. Thank you again also Ivo for helping out, Luis, Mohamed, Osama, and all the speakers. Thank you very much, and hope to be in touch soon again. Thank you.